Hey everybody, it's Master Gallengeist here, bringing you my review for The Mighty Thor issue 700, and it's pretty cool that we've gotten the 700 issues of Thor. And I really like this big issue celebrating Thor and kind of just getting everything set up to kind of like an endgame scenario of where we're going and kind of showing things into the future, what we can kind of tease out. And it was cool that they did all different kinds of artwork, having one artwork for the Odinson, one artwork for like Thor and the Hulk, and going out throughout the book. And I think they did a really good job of just showcasing different kind of art styles that still fit within the world that Jason Aaron's been building within this Thor universe. And I really like how they chose certain beats to just kind of like go through and just tell this kind of like whole story of where we're going to be going. So it starts off, we see the Odinson talking with Karnilla, the Queen of the Norns, at the Norn Keep, and of course, the Odinson's like, what's going on? What's going on here? Why did you call me here? And he's got his dog Thori with him as well, and of course, Karnilla's talking about how Malekith is seeking to destroy the Fates and kill the Norns. And it's like, holy shit, yeah, that's a pretty big important reason to kind of like get him there. And of course, she's like, we gotta make sure that everything's protected and we gotta just gear up for this because we don't know how and where he's gonna be kind of going. And of course, we get to the point where they do start kind of getting ready to attack. And it's like, okay, we have to figure out our attack plan. So, of course, we then see Thor and Hulk, of course, Jennifer Hulk, fighting. And it's kind of cool seeing this thing going over, saying like, hey, we've done stuff with Thor versus the Hulk, but never this Thor, never this Hulk. And it's interesting seeing Jennifer in a more traditional kind of Hulk-like role where she's angry and kind of like out of control, and Thor's just like trying to figure out how to stop this. And then we get a little bit of like background of how it got to here. Jane was going for a cancer treatment, and Jennifer was in the hospital as well, and got angry and everything, and we got to this point. So of course we then switch and we see Asgardia, and we see Volstagg and the other warriors are talking about how he's guarded by the Thunder Guard and how he's being taken someplace to be examined by the healers. And of course, at that point, we then see the ultimate Mjolnir come in, and Volstagg touches it and becomes War Thor again. I'm like, okay, War Thor is going to be important. So it's kind of cool that that's being brought back. Then we get to a kind of like background story of like what makes a Thor, showing a young Thor, young Loki, and just seeing Thor trying to prove his worthiness and trying to lift Mjolnir. And it was really kind of cool to kind of like explore what it is that makes someone worthy to be Thor. Now, of course, we didn't get the exact answer, but it's like seeing Thor doing all these things, going into battle, fighting and everything. It's like, alright. So then we get to the future, and we see, of course, his three granddaughters making storms and all that kind of stuff, and that was pretty cool. And we get to see, of course, King Thor, and, of course, Jane and Steve, the beings that he created, as we had seen at the end of Gore the God Butcher, are like, are they angry with us? He's like, no, that's just how they are. And he's like, well, why are we here? And then I like how Thor got into it and shows how he has become, at least in this version of King Thor, even, I think, wiser than Odin. And not really with Thor, you've got a certain amount of arrogance, but in this, I think he's just weary of the kind of facade that usually these gods put on, that they're so much better than people. And he just says, you know what? You're here to live, to be alive and live the lives that you want to live. And I was like, dang, because he's like, I'm going to tell you something those old bastards wouldn't. And just saying that you're here to just live. And I was like, wow, being that straightforward and just being that cool with people is just like, Yeah, that's Thor. That's cool. And to see that he hasn't lost it as a king is cool as well. And then we see all the rest of these kids be like, story time, and just see him sit down to like tell stories to people. It's a really kind of cool image and a really cool kind of future to look forward to for Thor. And we then get an important update on the Necro Sword, which was what Gore was using. We see Black Galactus, the Butcher of Worlds, going through and eating more worlds and everything. And out of nowhere, Ego's pissed off because we find out that he has been eating Ego's grandchildren. And they actually have a kind of titanic battle. And I say titanic because we've got a Necro Sword in Galactus and there's a giant world with a face just like fighting each other. And of course, it looks like Galactus has got him. He's like stabbed him through the mouth. But then at the end of it, he chomps down on his arm, and we see that Ego has now become Ego, the Necro World, and he devours Galactus. While Loki is watching, saying, I think there's an ending in sight, brother. And it's like, whoa, old Loki's alive. And it's like, whoa, seeing the Necro Sword take over Ego and just him just eating Galactus was awesome and hardcore. It's like, damn. So, of course, then we get to see Loki and his father, Laufey. They were pretty much ambushed by like other giants and dealing with that. And of course, Laufey passes out. And Loki's trying to kind of like bond with them and get more information. Like, is it true that his mother stabbed herself in the heart after he was born and all that? It's like, oh, damn. Now we get to Throg, who, of course, is the Thor frog. And he's just like, see this guy in like a park and kind of like, okay, what's going on with this? Why is this important? So, of course, we then go back to Thor versus the Hulk. They've kind of gotten to a airport because Thor was trying to take the battle kind of away from everyone. And they kind of crash in there. And then we see that, like, Carnilla has decided, once this battle has been going on with, of course, the Odinson trying to keep Malekith's forces at bay, she has gone in and decided to take the Threads of Fate and use them as weapons, which is badass. Because when's the last time you heard of a god of fate or an entity of fate using the Threads of Fate to, like, fight? It's, like, really kind of cool. And once she's, like, using this, she's telling us what she's seen. And then we get this really important and cool panel, and where we see all these different images. We see Loki with the Infinity Gauntlet and the Celestials. It's like, wow, what's Loki's game plan with using that? How's he going to get that? What's he going to do with it? We also then see Mangog and Namor and Valkyrie as around there as well as his Frost Giants. And then we get some really important stuff. We see the Odinson with a golden hammer and golden arm. Now, he is also dressed up typically as a Thor would be. So, I think this is showing that he will be deemed worthy again, either getting a suit-up Mjolnir, or be gifted a hammer because it looks similar to Stormbreaker used by Beta Ray Bill in Gold. That's why it's like, okay, there's even some kind of like callbacks with the way his like outfit's designed as well to Beta Ray Bill. And it's like, okay, I don't know. I know that like Beta Ray Bill's was forged in the same star as Mjolnir and given pretty much the same kind of properties. So does that mean that the Odinson is then bestowed with another Mjolnir and a arm that is forged within this star as well? Because that's important since they're gold, and we haven't seen King Thor with any gold kind of thing either. He was wearing the arm of the Destroyer. So that's kind of interesting possibilities that I really hope that they really dig into, and of course, I think that they're going to have some pretty cool surprises with that. And then the end, really, that we see, the other kind of important things we see, is we see Jane on the moon appearing dead. We see Loki, the future Loki, with the Necro Swords. Like, what? Okay, what's the Infinity Gauntlet plan, and what's the plan with the Necro Sword in the future? It's like, wow, okay. As well as, like, framing the whole panel is Jane as Thor bloodied, and we see her an up-close shot of her hammer. So, of course, we then go, and we're back to Carnilla fighting, and we see that the Giants have chopped off most of the roots of Yggdrasil, and the Nornkeep falls, and of course they celebrate, and it's like, oh shit. And it's like, what's gonna happen? So, of course, then we see Thor versus the Hulk, and Jane's pretty much gotten her into a building and uses Mjolnir to bring the building down after it's figured out that there aren't any people that would be in harm's way. So it's like, oh crap. So, of course, we then check back in with Throg. He's forced this guy to confess that he murdered this woman into the police station, and then he kind of goes on his way. So, of course, then we get back to Loki, and, of course, Loki wakes back up and like, I've been here for hours, there's giants are going to be coming. He's like, yeah, I did, and I slew them all, face to face. And he's like, oh, so you do have some frost giant in you and all that kind of stuff. And it's like, yeah. Granted, he doesn't look like you, he's smaller than you and everything, but he's a capable warrior, man. He deals usually in mischief and intrigue and subterfuge and espionage, but that does not mean he is any less of a capable warrior. Then we get to Thor, and of course she's transforming back into Jane because she is out of reach of Mjolnir, and she's in real trouble because she's under the rubble, and if she turns back into Jane, she's going to be crushed. And then at the last second, we see Throg come in, and of course, leading with his Mjolnir, so it's like, okay, so that way she can get help. Then we get back to the Odinson and Carnilla, and she's like saying, I've tried to tie off the threads as much as possible. He's trying to help her, and she's trying to tell him to tell him something about don't let Jane, because she's saying that my death isn't the one you need to worry about. But she's not able to finish, and that's kind of where we're left off with that. Then we check back in with Malkath at Svartalfheim, and all of them are like, everything's working. We took out the Norns, and we're getting ready to, your fate is yours now. It's like, no, I have the fate of all the realms. It's like, oh god. Then we get into a place that I didn't even, think that we would get to. We see Hela and Thanos. And Hela looks kind of weird here. Now, I'm not saying that, the artist drew her weird. It's like it looks funny or, bad art. She looks kind of different than what I was thinking. She looks more death-like, which, of course, goes into Thanos' infatuation and obsession with death, and they're kind of, working together to kill more people. It's like, whoa, they want to kill more people, and they embrace because she wants Hel back. And it's like, shit, that was a big thing that I didn't think was going to happen. So, of course, then we see Jennifer back to normal, and she's like, oh god, I blacked out again, I gotta make sure I don't do that anymore. And Throg just kind of doing his stuff, fighting some rats and all that. It's like, huh, interesting. And, of course, we get back to Thor, and she's like, alright, I can't let you out of my sight, Mjolnir. We got a lot of work to do. And the Nords are like, okay, our job is to draw out the stories that, that are in you. It's not to write your fate, but to draw out the most important parts of your story. And I'm like, okay, that's kind of cool seeing that. Then we get to the kind of end game. We see War Thor pretty much kind of confused on what he needs to do, figuring finish what he was started with Muspelheim and Svartalfheim, and then, of course, he gets hit by a goat and is sent to old Asgard, and this is Tooth Gnasher. And he's like, oh, so I guess you were sent to guard Hammer and everything. And as they're about to get at it, we see this giant Thagoom, and, of course, Tooth Gnasher goes off to investigate and gets grabbed and gets his head ripped off. And it's thrown back towards War Thor, and he's like, oh my god, it's you, it can't be. And, of course, we see this voice saying, you're no Thor I've ever seen, but you're Stark. And he's like, Mangog has returned to Asgard to render the ultimate judgment, starting with you, and rest assured you won't be the last. and we see them start to begin, but we don't see the clash exactly happen. And then we see the last shot being of Thor, and it's like, damn, everything's starting to happen now. We've got everything set up. This, I think, was a really great kind of like issue to get us kind of back to where we are, kind of not reset, but get stock of where all of our characters are at and set up for the future where we're going forward. And I'm really glad that we have now brought a kind of a furthering along of the War of the Realms, and now seeing that being brought into effect with Mangog, because we know Malekith was probably planning on something like that coming into effect to take on Asgardia. So I'm really excited to see where all these things go, especially seeing where like the Necro Sword goes, what that image of a Thor Odinson wielding a golden hammer and a golden arm, and how the death of Jane is going to play out. So those are my opinions on the issue. Tell me what you guys think in the comments below. If you liked it, if you didn't like it, if you agree with me, if you disagree with me. Also like and subscribe, and I hope you have a good day.